Hi science students, thanks for checking out the second screencast. This is going to be entitled Mitosis Overview, and in this pretty brief video we're going to talk about why cells have to divide. We're going to talk about what the word mitosis means, and then I'm going to introduce to you 4 stages of mitosis that hopefully you'll end up exploring later this week. We learned in September, as you guys all know, that all living things grow and develop. And we have a very general idea of what these words mean. Grow, growth. So let's say, for example, a seed or a pod or an acorn under the right conditions will grow, will increase its size to an adult tree, right? It is much bigger. It has increased much larger, right? The word development, we know that it means changing or maturity. So let's say, for example, this young baby, under the right conditions, if he has a healthy lifestyle, will hopefully develop into this very pleasant looking old man. So let's go back to the very beginning. You and I and your dog and your goldfish and any other living thing that has 2 parents started off as one cell. And this is one fertilized egg, the starting point for any organism, multicellular organism with 2 parents. And the term that we're talking about today, mitosis, is describing the process through which an organism goes from one cell in the very beginning to many cells, whether that be an adult human or an adult dog. These organisms, these multicellular organisms, go through a very similar process. And that term, that word, is described with this science term, which is called mitosis. So just a very simple definition is when we have one cell, and it goes through a series of steps. It goes through a process by which we now have 2 identical cells after mitosis is complete. And just to share with you, I know that we have been looking at the zebrafish a lot. Here's another example of an embryo, a single fertilized egg, growing into many cells. This is actually a frog egg. And you're hopefully noticing with extreme detail how this single cell is changing and dividing and splitting up into several cells. And it seems weird to think about it, but this is how we all started, as one fertilized egg turning into many cells. Back to our... how can I think back? So the acronym, the phrase that will help us remember the steps of this process, I remember simply as PMAT, and each of these letters is going to represent a different stage in the cell division process. So let's talk about before mitosis, a regular, in this case, animal cell, right? The cell is growing, the cell is maturing, it has organelles, it's carrying out its life functions, and we learn that there is genetic material that determine our inherited traits, or the inherited traits of the organism, located inside of this nucleus. This DNA is invisible to our eyes at this point, and I'm representing that with these thin lines, and these thin lines we're calling chromatin right now. So mitosis has not happened yet. However, the cell is getting ready to divide, and one of the steps in getting ready for this division is to duplicate its genetic material. Because remember, one cell is going to divide into 2, and each of those cells need to have the same material as the parent cell. So we were learning about PMAT, right? So the P stands for this first stage of mitosis called prophase. In prophase, you're noticing there's no longer a red nuclear membrane. That organelle is totally gone, and those chromatin fibers, right, have now started to condense, and they have, this is a very crude representation. They look like these butterflies or worms. We are calling these now chromosomes. Notice also these little yellow tic-tac looking organelles. We haven't learned about those yet. They're called centrioles. We're going to learn their significance later this week, certainly. But these centrioles kind of form these little fibers. They're called spindle fibers. And these spindle fibers will have a very integral role in helping these chromosomes go to their final destination. The M in PMAT stands for metaphase. Meta, the prefix meta means middle or in between. And if you're looking at this diagram, this model of a cell going through mitosis, in metaphase, you notice that those chromosomes are nicely lined up in the middle. These chromosomes are joined together. There's some terminology up here that we're going to learn later. If you have an opportunity to view this video later, these will definitely make much more sense to you. For now, all I want you to know is that the chromosomes are lining up in the middle, which looks very different than how this cell appeared before mitosis. After metaphase, we're reaching the A part, anaphase. So remember PMAT, right? Anaphase means that, or during the process of anaphase, these chromosomes, which were just a minute ago paired together in metaphase, in the middle of the cell, are now being pulled in opposite directions, but thanks to these centrioles and the spindle fibers. And that reminds me a lot of how certain superheroes might use their spindle fibers to pull antagonists or web them up, whatever. And finally, the T. The T stands for telophase. At this point, we're starting to see the appearance of those nuclear membranes. They're coming back, very faded. The chromatids, or the chromosomes, are starting to disperse and unwind into chromatin, and you're kind of seeing this, it's referred to as telescoping. If you've used a telescope before, if you know what a telescope is, captains and pirates used to use them to look at objects in the distance. This formerly kind of round cell membrane is telescoping. It's getting longer, it's elongating because it's getting ready to split into two what are referred to as daughter cells. So there's definitely a resemblance between the cell before mitosis and now what we're looking at in telophase. This last step is called cytokinesis. We're going to talk about it, but it's not a term that I'm going to ask you to memorize. But during cytokinesis, we now have two daughter cells, two products, whereas before we had one parent cell. And if you're looking in the interior of each of these cells, you're hopefully going to see the same organelles, the centrioles, the nucleus, the chromatin. The membranes are starting to pinch off, and you see we now have two very similar looking daughter cells. So coming back to our acronym again, PMAT. P stands for prophase, M stands for metaphase, A stands for anaphase, T stands for telophase. Okay, and just to summarize all of the steps of mitosis that we learned, here is an interactive representation of the stages of mitosis when one cell divides into two. And there are all of the steps, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, represented in a fluid process. This represents a little more closely how these organelles and how this process takes place in an actual cell. I think this is a picture of a real-life cell in the corner, so that gives us a little reference point there. Here it is one more time. We have our prophase, metaphase in the middle, anaphase pulled apart, telescoping, telophase, and then we are back to two cells, two daughter cells formed at the end of that process. All right, thanks for watching, and make sure you check out the Google form also posted with this assignment.